Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Alliances, which is episode 14 of Season 2 of Star Trek Voyager. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Voyager one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the second season episode, Alliances. So Alliances is the episode in which Voyager is getting their ass kicked on a daily basis by the Kazon, so Chakotay urges Janeway to make an alliance with one of the Kazon sex, and so Janeway goes to seek out and do negotiations with the Kazon. She tries to negotiate with Maj, Kola, and Seska, but that does not go well. And Neelix tries to find out about another Maj sex, but he gets arrested, and they run into the Trabe, who are the species that originally enslaved the Kazon, but are now constantly being attacked and pestered by the Kazon, are unable to establish a new homeworld, so Voyager decides to make an alliance with them, and their idea is to do a big meeting with all of the Kazon Majas to try to achieve peace. However, when they go to the meeting, they find out that the Trabe are just using this as an excuse to assassinate all of the Kazon Majas so that they can create chaos among the Kazon, and this of course pisses off Janeway to no extent, who stops this assassination attempt and then breaks off her alliance with the Trabe, and now Voyager are even worse off than they were before, but it's okay because Janeway gives a big speech. So, I actually like this episode. Usually when I give these sarcastic synopsis, usually is an indication I didn't like the episode. I actually do like this episode, so I'll just make that clear from the start. Maybe not a big fan of the ending, but here's the thing. So this episode is a big indicator of what Voyager should have been. Like, this storyline shouldn't have just been one episode, and they actually should have made an alliance. That would have made a lot of sense. And so this episode is very much a victim of the, here, let me bring it out, the giant reset button that needs to be smashed. But I've seen like polar opposite reactions to this. I've seen on the one end saying, well, this episode absolutely sucks because it highlights what Voyager should have been and what could have been, and it goes nowhere with it. And on the other polar reaction side, I've seen, well, this episode is great because it gives us an insight to what Voyager should have been and could have been. So it's like, yeah, so I find the two extreme reactions. I'm more on this episode's great side, to be fair, because I think it's good. Yes, it sucks that Voyager didn't do this as a continuing storyline, but I think it's good to at least get a glimpse on what could have been, what should have been, and to at least see it for one episode. And I remember, so when I first saw this episode, because I talked about a lot about how I stopped taping Voyager at this point when it was first airing, because I was used to tape all the Star Trek episodes and watch them over and over again, and I stopped taking Voyager. However, I did randomly tape this episode off of TV, and I kept it on a tape kind of on its own. It was with like other TV shows in the mix, but this was the only Voyager episode, but I kept that tape. So I did rewatch this episode over and over again, so it's actually one of the rare examples of Season 2 after the first bit of episodes that I actually did have on tape. So I'm actually very familiar with this episode, and I really, really liked it when I first saw it, which is part of the reason why I made sure to keep that tape that I taped it on. And I think, I don't think it's too bold of me to say that this is the best Kazon episode. I don't know. Well, State of Flux is probably going to get a higher rating. Well, I don't know what rating I'm going to give yet, but I'm going to assume maybe. Or it could be the same rating. So, State of Flux is, yeah, I don't know if I'd go as far to say that this is a better episode than State of Flux, but State of Flux wasn't really a Kazon episode. That wasn't focused on the Kazon. It was more focused on Seska and is she the spy. This is like a flat-out Kazon episode. Like, I don't think Season 1 actually had any flat-out Kazon episodes. There's a bunch in Season 2, and this is clearly the best, in my humble opinion. Because it does give us a glimpse and a look to the Klingon, to the Kazon. See, Freudian slip. Because I talked before in my review of Initiations, which was a bad episode about how the Kazon are just budget Klingons. But they don't come off as just budget Klingons in this episode. They do come off as a really dynamic, interesting, fleshed out species that have lots of ins and outs, lots of different political dynamics, and also the trade, introducing them, and because they were mentioned in Initiations, but it's different to actually see them and see the different dynamics that they bring to each other. But of course, the bigger thing about this episode is the whole thing about Voyager making an alliance, which again should have been an ongoing storyline. It should have been a thing, and they should have had to. I would have loved it if they actually did make an alliance with one of the Kazon sex. And getting to my complaints of this episode, here's the thing. Janeway didn't really seem to try very hard. She's like, oh, we should make an alliance with the Kazon sect, and I think it was Harry Kim who was like, well, being a sarcastic ass, well, might as well call Seska, and then B'Elanna's like, actually, that's a good idea. But that's the only one they talk to, is Maj, Kola, and Seska, and they should have realized that that's a bad idea. that wouldn't work out. I get what they're saying, this is what Seska's been trying to do, is trying to sort of bring it together so that she would be on board with it, but there had dealings with Maj Kola before. They know that he's quite the asshole. We didn't really see any of the other Kazon Majas as much as Kola, but I do get the impression, even though some of them are very, standoffish and warlike and hostile, that some of them actually might be more reasonable, especially some of the smaller sects that are in a less position to have as huge, the ship with all this advanced technology and advanced weapons, go up to him and be like, look, we will help defend you against your enemies. I'm sure a lot of sects would jump at that, but she did not fucking meet with anyone else. She didn't even give it a shot. And then Neelix went to see that one dude, and then Neelix was arrested for no good reason. The trade guy was like, oh, they're arresting, everyone who isn't Kazon. And I was like, wait a second. The scene at the bar that Neelix went into, there was a whole bunch of people there who weren't Kazon. None of them got arrested. It just seemed plot contrivance to me. And, they jumped straight to the war scene. Now, I do kind of get, in defense of this episode, that no Kazon Maj is going to want to make an alliance with her after she participated in a assassination attempt on all of them. Now, granted, she did save them, but she was with the trade to help set it up in the first place. So I do get that no one's going to want to make an alliance with her after that. But they didn't have to write it that way. And plus, to my sarcastic thing in my synopsis, they kind of ended worse off. The episode didn't resolve anything. The start of the episode is the Kazon's constantly kicking their ass, and we're losing crew members, and we're not going to be able to survive. And then the end of the episode is, oh, we're worse off now, but it's all good because I'll give a big speech, and then it's never touched on ever again. kind of undermines this whole thing. And talking about the start of the episode where I can't even remember the dude's name, but this one guy died, and like, oh no, not that guy. And B'Elanna's like, no, I was so close to him. And Chakotay gives this big speech about he come in and fought the good fight and saved his life, and he was a good friend. Yet we've never seen or heard of this guy ever before. I'm sorry. Stuff like that does undermine the whole thing. I think it's kind of insulting my intelligence a bit to be like, oh, this guy off screen that never appeared before, it was such a good guy, and everyone, even Janeway's like, oh my god, I can't believe that guy, not that guy. Sorry. This stuff like that irritates me. Fucking show them. If you want to, you can't just do that like halfway through the second season. You gotta actually build up to this and earn it, not do this stupid bullshit. Like they're trying to say it like it has stakes because, oh, now Chakotay's good friend, B'Elanna's good friend died. Oh god, that really raises the stakes. No, it fucking doesn't, because we don't know who the fuck this is. You just invented them for this episode. It's cheap and it doesn't work. But speaking on the topic of introducing Maquis, we do get Hogan in this episode. I think he only appears in like 6 or 5 episodes. He doesn't actually appear as much as like my memory. In my memory, he appeared like all the time, but I think it was good to have that recurring character. And of course, we also get Michael Jonas, his introduction in this episode as well. And actually, this is the first time that starts the Michael Jonas storyline, because he does contact the Kazon in this episode. I didn't remember that it started in this episode. I thought it started a bit later. So this is officially the beginning of the controversial Michael Jonas storyline, which I'll get more into in some of the follow-up episodes. But some of the writers, particularly Kenneth Biller, because he sucks, were very upset about having this ongoing serialized storyline because, oh, I had a great episodic episode and they made me ruin it by putting this Kazon thing in it, blah, blah, blah. But it's fucking done. That's like commonplace now. That's what every show does now, because that's actually a good thing, dumbass. But sorry, but I'll get to that when I get to Life Science, the episode in question. But this is actually, I think, is a good thing. I think it's, even though the Michael Jonas storyline itself was kind of meh, and especially because of the ending, the episode that led to sucked, which kind of invalidated the whole storyline, but it's a good idea. Like, I think that they were on the right track, and Michael Piller was on the right track, and he should have taken over the show and not been fired, but that is a topic for another time. But yeah, so I think it did make Voyager seem more fleshed out and more like a ship, like a community, having Hogan and Michael Jonas and then keeping them there and having them reappear. And of course, if you notice, Hogan was killed off at the start of season 3 after they fired Michael Piller and decided to get away from everything. It was like, oh, reoccurring characters, we don't want them. Let's just have Neelix have him go to a cave and be eaten by a monster. Fucking pisses me off. I guess that's better than simply not showing him again like they did with Carrie and then bringing him back 6 years later just to kill him off. It's better than that, but still, why don't you just fucking keep reoccurring characters? Like, but it was good. Like, and I liked the Hogan, like his confrontation with Janeway and how there was discontent among the crew because they were. This is almost like a Year of Hell type storyline before we actually get to the real Year of Hell, because of that the Voyager is constantly getting attacked by the Kazon. Now, this just comes up out of nowhere in this episode. We have not actually seen Voyager constantly get it's been alluded to a bit, and they've had, a couple episodes with maneuvers and initiations where they encounter Kazon, but we've never been shown that they're like constantly getting their ass kicked to the point where there's discontent among the crew. Like, they just instantly brought it up for this episode and it instantly went away after this episode, which is Voyager, which is Voyager for you. Now, I do talk a lot about how seasons 1 and 2 were better at continuity than later seasons, and I firmly stand by that. But it was still, the Michael Jonas thing is a great example. In fact, this other YouTuber was like, oh, the Michael Jonas thing was the only continuous thing in season 2. I'm like, what the fuck you talking about? We got Hogan. We just had like character stories that were more continuous. I think, and there's way more like continuity in season 2 than there is in later seasons. Later seasons, they fucking love this thing. But this thing was still around. In season 2, because the producer was like, oh, it can't be serialized, no. And even when D Space Nine did it, they were like, you're killing the show. Now, to their credit, it was first run syndication, so they did kind of have a point. It was before the days of DVD. As I said, when I missed an episode, I was like, I didn't tape it off the TV, it was gone, and there was no way for me to watch it again. So, doing serialized storytelling in that kind of outfit was different than doing it now. So, from a purely, budgetary, producer standpoint, they had a point, but from a storytelling standpoint, they can go fuck themselves. This is much better. Even if you don't need to have Lost style serialized or Breaking Bad style serialized storytelling, you could just at least keep some continuity, especially character continuity, the way that Strange New Worlds now does, where they have a lot of episodic episodes, but they keep the character continuities. They don't smash this fucking thing at the end of every episode. They keep, but keeping with episodic episodes, but making it the character stories, when something happens, it matters and it stays. That's what they should have done. It would have been fine with their first run syndication. Maybe some people, people wouldn't be that lost if they just referenced, this is why I'm thinking of the previous episode affected me. TNG did that in season 4 a lot. So don't give me this bullshit. They were just fucking cowards, these producers. And I think that's very important for this episode, because they should have kept the storyline going. This should have been an arc throughout the season. As I said, they should have actually been forced to make an alliance with the Kazon. That would have led to some good character stories, good storytelling. You'd have a story about the Kazon sect that they allied with, being attacked, and the Voyager being forced to attack these other ones, and the situation being more nuanced, and maybe it messes up their alliance, and maybe they have to form an alliance with someone else. They could have done a lot of good things with this. And so I understand the frustration of the people who hate this episode about, this is what the show should have done, but I come down in the opposite way, that at least we get to see a glimpse in one episode. At the very least, we get to see a glimpse. And I think it's a good thing. The speech that Tuvok gives about comparing it to the Klingon peace treaty, that was a good scene. And that was a very good point that Tuvok was making. And I think it's disappointing that they just totally forgot about it after this episode. It would have made more sense and it would have been a big deal for Voyager having to ally themselves with thugs who were, just not reputable at all, and trying to make it work and trying to hold on to their Federation values, but doing what's practical to survive. We never got this. we get another example of this in one episode, self-contained episode in season 7, The Void, which I loved, by the way, for the same reasons I like this episode. That it shows what the show could have been. What they did in The Void, that should have been an entire season. That should have been most of the show, really, not just one fucking episode. But I look at it as at least we get it in one episode. And I think this, seeing in the Trabe, of course, they were an interesting dynamic. I actually love what they did with the Trabe, how they're like, oh, we're the best allies, we're going to be your friends, oh, this is great, we're going to bring peace, and now they're just fuckers who try to use them to assassinate all the other Kazon. And it's like, yeah, that kind of, because the analogy here is clear that it's not a one-to-one analogy, but the Trabe are basically, clan members, and they're like former slave owners, and they pretend like, oh, they have this public face of, no, we're for peace and blah blah blah, and we regret what we did, but secretly they're like, no, let's lynch them all. So that's basically what it was. And of course, Voyager should not make an alliance with them whatsoever. But I love the deception. I love how they were pulled in to thinking, oh, these are, and as an audience member, I thought that too. I was like, hey, these guys look great. Yeah, make an alliance with them. This is going to be so awesome. And so I love that they tricked me like that and pulled the wool out from under me and being like, actually, these guys are fucking, racist assholes who can't be trusted, and they have their own, devious intentions. And so I love that. I love that ending. I thought it was really intense when, because Janeway was warned somebody's going to try to sabotage it and someone's going to try to leave, and she was waiting for one of the Kazon to leave, and I love they had to fake out when Maj Color went up to get a drink, and Tuvok was all freaking out. Is he leaving? He's like, no, I'm just getting a drink, calm down. But then the Trabe guy is like, I think we should go out in the hallway. And it's just like, wait a second. That was great. I think, yeah. So overall, I think this is a really good storyline. Yes, it should have been more episodes, the whole season, if anything. But, hey, it works for this one episode. I'd rather have this episode than not have it. And I think the way they executed it, as I said, this is like one of the rare times when the Kazon were actually interesting. And it fleshed them out as characters. You see the different dynamics. So, I mean, it would have been better if they had Voyager make an alliance with one of the sex, but it is what it is, and we got what we got, and I think that this is worth having. So I would now like to thank my Patreon supporters very much for supporting me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does help me continue with the channel. I'd like to give a big special thanks to Brandon Neal Howells and Jordan Johnson. Thank you both so very, very much for your strong support. I'd also like to give a shout out to Tyler Cease, Benjamin Mead, Antarius, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joe Lavals, Alessandro Miguelcio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So, let's see. I don't think we have any Facebook comments for this episode. Or maybe we do. Hold on, let me check. Yes, we have one Facebook comment who says, I never understood why they would make an alliance with the Kazon in the first place. I know they need to survive, but making an alliance with the former crewmate, now enemy, made no sense. Well, agree to disagree on that one, because I actually think Tuvok explains this very well in his analogy with Klingons. Plus, they're getting their asses kicked, and they have to be practical. And Chakotay breaks that down too. So I think the episode explains it. Now, of course, this would have been better if they were setting up the situation in previous episodes and it just didn't come out of nowhere and then disappear right after this episode. But, hey, is what it is. So now we'll get to the Patreon comments. First of those is from Kyrie091, who says, alliances, more like, oh my, this is shit. Seska is my GF. We have something special. Anytime she's on screen, we have the secret code where she hides a coded love message for me. In this episode, the message was, Kyrie, you so sexy, and you can see it at time index 2432. She is only pretending to like Chakotay and Cullen. She really likes me best. She's so cute. Didn't realize you had a Seska crush there. And I will say something. Seska, especially in Cardassian makeup, more sexy than Martha Hatchett. Or Hackett, or however you pronounce her name, who plays Seska. There, I said it. Cardassian Seska is sexy. Anyway, next comment is from Norman Buchwald, who says, the main issue of Alliances was that looking at it thematically, and with Catherine Janeway's preaching speech at the end, that somehow the Prime Directive has its point and it must be followed, even though already by this point we can start counting how often it was broken with respect to destroyed shuttlecraft and launched torpedoes. Once we attempt to overlook that aspect, it could be compelling to try to remind us that yes, this is a crew comprised of Maquis, some who have never had the same training or have certain skeptical to it, and to consider other options. It also is the only other time, except for the Void, well, at least on screen, I guess. At least on screen, I guess, off screen in the Year of Hell, that efforts are made to build well the alliances that may be necessary for survival. The end of the episode tries to restore status quo, which is puzzling considering, well, what has changed with their predicament? Nothing, really, and it was still a dire situation. As for the story itself, it really is not that bad. During my first viewing, I found myself a bit turned off hearing applause as each Maj went to their respective podiums, but that's a minor issue. And it's interesting that in this situation, Voyager is being used as a pawn to get the Trabe's objectives, assuming it ever would have worked. I suspect all the Kazon would have done is bring up more Majas, and Seska may have risen up in authority more realistically than, say, cough, cough, Maul ever could have. But it's actually not a bad episode, and definitely not as much as the worst as Lore Runner has often commented. Still, that preachy ending, was it fully earned? And with the Berman-esque reset button, did that finally make this episode even worse? I've heard a few comment that the problem with The Void was that the episode came too late and tried to make up some things that should have been discussed and done more effectively. Where am I? And even though in this case there wasn't a dire common goal like in The Void, still this episode demonstrates so much potential what the series could have been, as it makes sense, even if momentarily, as Voyager explores through the needs for trade and cooperation, may need to rely more on as you call it, the Prime suggestion instead of the Prime directive. I'll give it 7.5 out of 10. I don't know if you were being sarcastic when you said the applause for each Maj, because they didn't actually applause, but they did present it in a way. Introducing Maj, what's its face, and how old's Maj? Like, I didn't mind that. I've heard other people comment on that, but it actually made sense in story why they would do that, and plus they would, all the Majas there would deserve respect. They're like leaders of their respective countries, so I didn't have an issue with it, personally. But yes, so yeah, I didn't even think about what the consequences would have been if the trade were successful. I don't know, possibly it could have ended up being better for Voyager, but maybe worse, because I think all the sects might have united against Voyager. They would have had the common enemy, especially they risked doing that just by aligning themselves with the trade, but participating in the assassination of all their leaders would have cemented it. Like, they definitely would have all joined up together to take Voyager down. So yeah, I do think things would have been worse for them had the trade succeeded. But that's just, my guess. As a writer of the show, you could have actually taken it any way you want to. But to me, that would be the most logical conclusion. But yeah, they do fucking love that reset button. And yeah, now, like, I know I'll get to the void when I get to the void, but it's better. Having is better than not having. Yes, it's the same thing I think about this episode, really. It's like, yes, it's an indication of what Voyager should have done. And I think the same argument could be made for Year of Hell. But I think that's easily the best episode of the show, because just because Voyager didn't do something they should have doesn't mean when they have one or two episodes that do it correctly, doesn't mean that they suck because they show what the show should have been. I actually think they make it good because they show what the show should have been. But that's just, it's just a different way of looking at it, I suppose. Anyway, next comment is from Ricky, who says, "To me, this is easily the best Kazon episode, and also quite possibly the best Seska episode as well in this season, particularly. The concept of Voyager having an alliance with the Kazon after being constantly attacked is actually a great idea, and the entire episode is so intense and has great dialogue and scenes, especially towards the end of the episode when there was a bomb attempt to destroy the alliance, and killing everyone was so intense. However, it does come to my main complaint of this episode that unfortunately this alliance doesn't happen. I wish it was a long-term story arc, but still love this episode, and again it proves that season 2 is a great season, so my rating is a 9 out of 10. Yeah, I think this is a good episode itself, onto its own. Like, I think people shouldn't be bothered by the fact that this should have been a long story arc. I mean, I'm a little bothered by it, but it doesn't degrade this episode, in my humble opinion. Anyway, next comment is from Antarius, who says, "I like how this episode is dealing with Voyager's unique situation in the Delta Quadrant, a kind of story later seasons did less and less. And in Scorpion, we see Janeway eager to forge an alliance while Chakotay is hesitant. Here, the situation is reversed. Janeway seems to have forgotten her own big speech at the end of the episode when she was willing to help someone as evil as the Borg. The scene between Janeway and Tuvok was great. They don't have that many scenes together, although they are supposed to be old friends. Tuvok's comparison to the Khmer Accords with the Klingons was fitting, and like Star Trek VI, this episode features an attack on a peace conference. On one side, they did a good job here in setting up the character of Michael Jonas, but on the other side, we have never seen the dead crewman before. Instead of showing his friendship to Chakotay in at least one episode, we only hear about it afterwards. What happened to Neelix's shuttle? Hopefully Neelix set up some kind of booby trap, otherwise the sect would have access to Starfleet technology. I have the feeling that the script implies that Neelix doesn't know about the Trabe and their past relationship with the Kazon, which seems to me quite unrealistic. Speaking of unrealistic, why are 3 of Voyager's irreplaceable torpedoes used in this situation? Why aren't the torpedoes able to destroy the small Trabe / Kazon ship? My rating is a strong 9 out of 10. Without Janeway's final speech and the cave scenes, it would have been a 10. Yeah, Janeway's final speech is not particularly good. Yeah, no, and you also bring up a good point about the crewman who died, that we never talk about, but because it was Voyager showrunners being like, using the tell not show method of storytelling. Let's just tell not show. Always the best thing to do, right? Anyway, yeah. So as for like the comparison to Scorpion and how Janeway and Chakotay were switched, that's true. But I actually buy it. Like, it feels natural to me because the situations aren't exactly the same thing. The Borg are not the Kazon. Let's be clear. The Borg are a lot more hostile. And I don't think Janeway's contradicting her big speech in the episode Scorpion, because I think it is a totally different situation, hell of a lot more dire, if we're going to be honest. And I actually buy that the situations would be reversed, and I actually think it's clever the way the show did that. And you make an excellent point about Neelix's shuttle. I was thinking the same thing while I was watching this episode. I was like, wait a second, he just left that shuttle behind with all this Starfleet transporters, replicators, all this Starfleet technology. He's just leaving it there for the Kazon to have. I guess we're to assume that he sabotaged it the same way Chakotay sabotaged his shuttle, but really, like, Neelix would do that? And the other thing I was thinking is, why didn't Neelix just take his own cargo ship? Why did he have to take a Starfleet shuttle by himself without any actual Starfleet officers in it? I don't know. It seems like he would have been better off taking his own shuttle. Like, it seems like the show forgot that he had a shuttle. Later on, they'll remember, but that is definitely a plot hole. Now, as far as the irreplaceable torpedoes, I don't recall, because you're not the first person to bring this up. I've heard this mentioned many, many times before about Voyager, firing any of their irreplaceable torpedoes. So maybe it was mentioned in an episode. I don't recall them mentioning that the torpedoes are irreplaceable and precious. I think maybe once or twice they might have mentioned it, but here's the thing. Like, and all the continuity issues that Voyager has, which are numerous, this is one of the ones that concern me the least. Like, I don't really care. Like, it makes sense for the story. They could just make up some bullshit thing. I was like, oh, we managed to trade this things for this other thing that lets us have more photon torpedoes. Boom. Problem solved. Like, it's better than the whole bullshit about the endless shuttlecrafts and saying that, like Prodigy tried to retcon it to be like, oh, there's this thing that can create shuttlecraft. Bullshit. Voyager never had that. So yeah, they were trying to fix that plot hole, but I was like, no. So that's worse. The whole shuttlecraft thing is much worse than the torpedo thing. Torpedo thing, I'm happy to hand wave away. I don't really care. Because the writers should not be crippled by that. They shouldn't have to count how many torpedoes they're using. Just say, oh, we got another supply that allows us to make more. There, problem solved. Anyway, next comment is from Benjamin Mead, who says, this is a great episode. I think that this would have been a general season-long arc, forging alliances, navigating all the sects, getting to know the Trabe over several episodes, and their heel turn would have been even more dramatic. Still, this is one of the best Season 2 episodes. The damage scenes at the beginning were great. If there's one thing Voyager does better than other Legacy shows is ship damage, e.g. Year of Hell Caretaker, Deadlock. The lights hardly even went out on the old D. This staff meeting was also a good scene. My partner said, damn, she can't make anyone happy in that meeting. So as far as Voyager being the best to handle damage, I would actually, among all the Legacy track shows, I would actually, my humble opinion, say Enterprise was the best at it. Not only for individual episodes like damage, but I think what makes Enterprise mostly better than Voyager is the fact that they don't smash this thing. that the damage stays and doesn't magically disappear. I think that does make a difference. Like, in individual episodes, yes, Voyager does handle it very well. The ship looks like it's falling apart and it's gritty, and you don't really get that in the Enterprise D. Not really in Deep Space Nine either, to be honest. I think Voyager does have that sort of more, and plus the fact that Voyager's alone and they can't go to a starbase for repairs, like, it does up the stakes. But then that actually makes it kind of worse when it just magically repairs itself. Especially Deadlock. Deadlock is probably the worst example because the ship was completely falling apart, and next episode it's completely fine. Somehow off screen they magically fixed that. I love how that actually doesn't happen with Enterprise. Like the Xindi arc, when in the episode Damage, which, as you know, is my favorite episode of Enterprise, when the ship gets damaged, it remains damaged for the rest of the season. Like, that is what Voyager should have done. But yeah, we all know that Voyager's biggest issue is that there was no continuity. Like, it would have its way to avoid it when it would have helped it. But anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, "This is what Voyager should have been. Instead of a starship being alone in the Delta Quadrant, we sure get a lot of standalone episodes, which some were great or okay, and a lot of garbage. Even if the Kazon story arc wasn't great, if it's one of the best enemies on the show, the Vidians were the best by a country mile. The Borg were turned into a joke, Species 8472 were destroyed by awful writers, the Hirogen were mishandled, 50 other races that were in one episode, which includes two-part episodes. This is why Season 1 and 2 are the best of the show. Season 4 was really done by the writers of Deep Space Nine. Only Voyager could fecht up a great concept with Species 8472. After basics, I will only comment on episodes I really like or have something to say about that episode. If I don't comment, it's either just okay, crap, garbage, or I just don't care. So my rating is a 9. At least they parodied the best scene in The Godfather Part 3. Even Voyager knew it wasn't a good show when they referenced The Godfather Part 3 out of 10. I am not very familiar with any of the Godfather movies, so I don't know to which reference you're speaking. I suppose you're talking about the end where they tried to kill all the Maquis. I'm just guessing. I've never seen Godfather Part 3. You know, it's funny, I was watching the Delta Flyers podcast, and they were saying that this was a big homage to Braveheart. The ending of that, how I don't even know what they were referring to. Were they referring to when William Wallace went around killing all the nobles that betrayed him? Or were they referring to the fact when the English tricked William Wallace to a meeting and killed him? And they were like, Garrett Wong was like, oh, this Braveheart came out in 95, the same year this came out. Oh, they were definitely copying off of it. Or I was like, not really. I don't think they're that similar. And plus, that's kind of a common thing to have, someone try to trick all these people into a room to kill them. That's a common thing. That's not unique to any one particular movie. That's like saying, a murderer murdering someone in a dark room and hiding it and being a mystery is unique to one film. It's a trope. It's something that a lot of movies can do. Granted, not as common as a trope as the example I gave, so maybe not the best example, but still, you get what I'm saying. And I think it's totally fair about not commenting on every Voyager episode after Season 2. I totally see how that's fair. Although I will disagree, because I think you're implying that... Oh no, maybe you're not implying, so never mind. That Season 4 isn't as good as 1 and 2, because as you know, I think Season 4 is the best of the show. But yeah, other than Season 4, 1 and 2 were where the show was good, and afterwards it got bland and mediocre, and totally agree with you there. I'm glad, a lot of people see eye to eye with me with this, but if you go outside of my little bubble, there's tons of people who hate Season 1 and 2 and think the show got good in 3, which that opinion will never cease to boggle the fuck out of my mind, like how anyone could possibly think the later seasons are better than the earlier seasons. Like, even my sister came to the same conclusion, like, totally on her own without me, and most of you probably did as well. And there's a lot of people who agree with me, and 1 and 2 were better. So I don't like that. I just totally get, like, you just like mediocre bullshit where forehead aliens attack the ship every time there's no character continuity whatsoever. Alright, well, that's up to you, I guess. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neal Howells, who says, well, it's good that the Maquis finally gets some screen time, and I really enjoyed Chakotay's speech about Kurt Bandera. Oh, that's that guy's name. I didn't even remember his name. I have to ask just how far Kazon territory extends. Janeway out-destroyed the ship before I turn any part over to the Kazon confirms that she is a psychopath. Tuvok's Orchid hybrid predicts Tuvix. Any fool should have that an alliance with Kulla wouldn't work because he only wants women for sex. Seska would have made a far more interesting ally. Why didn't Neelix take his own ship when looking for the friend who owes him several large favors? If I had been oppressed 30 years ago, I would and am less forgiving than the Trabe leader, who now sounds like Mavis, which to my amusement. Then there's the sneaky attack by the Trabe, which doubtless inspired the very similar scene in Star Trek Into Darkness. Except nobody dies in this version. How did the Trabe ship sneak up undetected and escape so quickly? This beggars belief. Janeway orders the Trabe leader off her ship and gives an annoyingly sanctimonious speech about how the Starfleet way of doing things is the best way. And I just wanted to punch her smug, self-righteous face to a pulp. She will act more ruthlessly than either the Trabe or the Kazon in Equinox. 4 titty bar dancers out of 10. Alright, I'm going to address that first of all, the titty bar dancers, because, yeah, that's another thing the Delta Flyers podcast, they were hamming on the fact that there was, like, an erotic dancer at this thing, and Robert Duncan McNeil was, like, very much against it. He was like, why are they doing it? He was, like, fixated on it. And I barely noticed it. Like, it's barely part of the scene. And I'm sorry, but this is actually a common trope, and many other Star Trek episodes has done this as well. The one that sticks in my mind because it's recent to my rewatch is our man Bashir. Now, granted, it's a holosuite program, but still, like when Bashir went to the club where he went to the back room and played whatever fucking card game that he played with Worf, like on his way to the back room, we did see some dancers, and I think they were no less erotic than the dancer we see in this episode. Like, obviously she wasn't actually naked because this is UPN television. They're not going to actually show an actual stripper. They just imply one, just like they did with our man Bashir. So honestly, I don't think it's a big deal, and I thought Robert Duncan McNeil was stupid for making a big deal out of it. But anyway, yeah, don't mention Tuvix. don't even get me started. I think there was another episode actually earlier that Tuvok mentioned that he was actually into, like, gardening or whatever, or plants or whatever the fuck you call it. Botany, I suppose. Anyway, yeah, of course I had the same thought about Tuvix, god damn it, you got it stuck in my head. Neelix, I had the same thought about Neelix, about how, why didn't he take his own ship? That is a good point. And I didn't think of Into Darkness as a comparison. I think that's a more apt comparison than The Godfather Part 3 or Braveheart, because this is also a starship, a small little starship that comes down and shoots inside a window. So I think that is probably the best comparison. Of course, they're both Star Trek. I don't know. I don't think I'd give the Into Darkness writers credit for saying that they modeled it off of this, because they probably never saw an episode of Voyager in their lives. Like, they barely know Star Trek at all. Beyond is different. Simon Pegg actually does appreciate and know Star Trek, as we know, but the Into Darkness writers just saw Star Trek 2 and like, let's do this again. And let's make it Star Wars, just like the first one is. And let's have this big action sequence, ship crashing into it. Anyway, so I think it's more of a coincidence that it's just happened to be a similar trope. Because, as I said, it's a common trope, but this is both done in the Star Trek setting, so I think that's what makes them similar. I mean, having, a small starship shoot outside a window, I think it's a coincidence, but that's just my guess. Anyway, thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So, my rating for Alliances out of 10 is going to be a 9 excellent. So, I am giving it as high as State of Flux. Although, State of Flux is a strong 9, well, this is probably like a regular 9. It's not strong or weak, it's just a 9. Because it does have its issues. The sanctimonious speech, I will agree, was kind of dumb. Because, I don't know, the speech unto itself I don't hate. But I hate the fact that it's like, we're in a worse situation. Like, at the start of the episode, like, we're in an untenable situation. This is not sustainable. We're doomed. And at the end, they're like, we're in a worse situation now. But it's all good because we have our principles. And it's not touched on ever again. Yeah. But so, I mean, the problems with this episode all stem around this thing here. The reset button. Not my treat button is what I keep holding up. But the reset button. But if it wasn't for that, this would be a good standalone episode. It is frustrating to know that what the show could have been if they actually listened to Michael Piller more and done more of the serialized storytelling. But I'd rather have this episode than not have it, because it's really good. Yeah, good. Like, it's a well-written episode, and I think something Robert Duncan Neal pointed out, that I think it's well lit. I like the lighting choices in this episode better than most episodes. It just seems more like vibrant and more sort of, I don't know, hard to describe, but for some reason, it's like, I don't know why the lighting would be different in this episode. And the writing is strong, the acting is strong. Like, I think it's just into itself a very interesting episode. And again, as I said, I like the way the Trabe played them, and how the episode like fooled me into thinking the Trabe were great, but then pulled that wool out from under me. Like, I thought that was great, and I thought all the follow up, and it flushes out the Kazon. So ultimately, I think the positives do outweigh the negatives, and the negatives all stem from the fact that it's not serialized, which is a problem with the show entirely. Now, granted, it sticks out more, but still, like, I can't really hold it that much against the episode like some people choose to, which especially saying I hate this episode because it shows how the show shouldn't. That doesn't make any sense to me. If you got a good episode, you got a good episode. But anyway, that is it for my review of Alliances. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, that sort of thing. It helps me out a lot. And if you would really like to help me out, you could do so by supporting me on Patreon. There's a link in that description below. There's different tiers, such as you can make comments, I'll read in my videos, pre-releases, series of patron-only videos exclusive to my Patreon supporters, where I revisit reviews I've made, that sort of thing. You can check out if you so desire. You could also, in that link below, description below, you can check out links to my Blue Sky page and Facebook page, where you can leave shorter comments that I'll read in my videos for episodes. And also many other like fun memes and stuff. You can check me out if you're interested in that. So let's see what's coming up. on the old channel here. Where are we, Alliances? So Monday will be my review for the DS9 episode Crossfire. Thursday, of course, covering the next episode, Strange New World, Season 3, Episode 8. And then on Saturday, over on Patreon, for one of those Patreon exclusive videos, my revisited for the masterpiece known as Threshold. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check me out as I continue to cover Star Trek Voyager and Star Trek Deep Space Nine and many other Star Trek shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.